Good morning folks, and welcome to the workshop of Armitage Leather. We're going to be making a pouch. Who doesn't want to make a pouch? This is just one video in a series of videos looking at pouches specifically. All the designs and templates, totally printable, and you can print off the designs. They're in the pack, glue them to card, and you can work from them. There's a whole video on your template, so you can have a look at that. You can go to my website www.armitageleather.com/shop, and it's £12 to download the pack. It's 40 odd pages, crammed full of information. If you print all the templates off, and some of the pages you have to print twice because there's a duplicate for different ends, you'll end up with 10 different designs of pouch. Now, if you were to use this pack just to cut your teeth, fantastic, you're going to learn so much. The video is going to help, the pack's going to help. If you want to make bushcraft items, perfect, you can make these pouches as intended, make 10 of each one, take them to a show, sell them, fund your craft. Awesome, and kudos to you for that. Your other option, and this is where I'd like to lean you towards, is to look at the value of the techniques contained in the pack and the videos. Also in the pack is a large explanation on increasing the size and looking at your seam tolerances of each pouch to turn it into a larger pouch, a bag, whatever you want it to be. So it's looking at taking that skill set and transferring it onto bigger items once you're comfortable with your techniques. So if you struggle with any of the techniques needed to make this pack or any one of the packs contained in the series of videos, you can go to my Vimeo channel. It's an online resource of multiple videos, not just on the pouches or the techniques using the pouches. It covers a whole range for many different items. All the tools and materials used in the videos to make these pouches are listed at the back of the pack. They're all hyperlinked, so if you keep the pack online, you can just click and it'll take you straight to it. If you have any questions or see any glaring mistakes, drop me an email, let me know, I'll adjust. So we're ready to begin. The first pouch in this video that we're going to look at is the flat round pouch. So let's have a look at the round pouch flat. Two pieces of leather stitched together back to back to make a small little pouch, and it's as simple as we can make it, but it's about scope. Now if you're cutting your teeth, this is a brilliant way of doing so. You can make small pouches that you can put your headphones in, your keys, your coins, whatever you want to. Increase the size, increase the volume. But what we've done is, from our template pack, we've cut our two templates out, glued them to a piece of 1.5mm card, and then cut those out. These we can draw around on the leather. They're nice and stiff, so we can hold them in place. We've printed our pack off in relation to our round pouch flat, and these are all the instructions that we need. So we can set these aside so they're in our eye line. We'll take a piece of leather and make sure that that is big enough to get our two pieces of leather from. But before we do so, we've created a hole on the front for our pippin punch. That's good to go. We've got our front section here, also good to go, but what we need to do is to put our 3mm hole on the front for our sand brown stud. Now we're going to want to mark our stitching up, and ideally our stitching will want to go from this dot, 4mm in from the end, 4mm in from the edge, all the way around the outside to this dot here, equally 4mm in, 4mm in. But I'm using KS blade punch, 7 stitches per inch. You may not. The iron that you have may differ. So if we were to start with our first tooth on this mark and go all the way around the outside to this mark, there is the possibility if you're using a different iron, that's not going to meet up. So, irrelevant of what iron you're using, this will ensure that your lines will be nice and straight at the top. Our first tooth we're going to put on our centre point. Now we'll notice we have a faded line running down the centre of all the patterns. This is our centre line. This centre line crosses our stitch line at the bottom, and that is where we will put our first tooth. And just add a little bit of pressure to ensure that our first hole crosses our centre and stitch line nicely, and we can commit to that. And then what we will do is we will work our way up to the right towards our dot. Let me speed this up a little bit to get to that point. And there we have our last hole on the dot, and we'll do exactly the same the other side. What you may find if you're stitching this 8 stitches per inch, or if you vary the stitch line, and 4mm is quite heavy, we can bring that down to 3mm, it is entirely up to you. But this top stitch may vary very slightly if we change the SPI or change the line, but that will ultimately give us our top hole, and our top hole wants to match this top hole here. So I shall do exactly the same around the other side, ensuring that our first and last hole are absolutely bang on line, and if they are, then we can transfer everything through. So let me do those, then come back and we'll look at taking our information to our back pattern. So that's our front pattern, we want to take our holes to our back pattern. Let me do that, come back. So we put the holes all the way around the base. Our top 2 holes line up a dream, our centre hole lines up a dream. So what we can do now is, well, we don't necessarily on this case have to transfer over, because these top 2 dots mark our top 2 holes, which are here and here. So what I can do in this situation is put my first tooth on that top line, exactly the same again on the bottom line, and we're good to go for our marks. So the next thing we will do is place our leather onto the board, making sure we've got enough space to work, and we can now press and hold that firm. Using a scratch awl, we can now scribe around our template, marking out where we need to cut. We don't move the leather. What we will do is mark the first 2 holes, top and bottom, and we will take our pippin punch, pop that over our slot, centre and mark. And then when we take our template off, all of the holes that we need are marked up on our leather. So what I'm going to do is just confirm that's in a good position and commit properly, like so. That's ready to cut out. We will do exactly the same with our short front section. With our hole punch, we can put on the top press, our top hole, and then scribe out, ready for cutting. All of our information has now been transferred to our leather. and we're ready for cutting out. So again, I will use a hook bill knife for want of a better expression. This is a little bit bigger. This is one of Terry's knives, a little bit bigger than the clicker's knife, but it works exactly the same way. It gives that lovely little draw cut. So this is quite jumpy. Don't be frightened about using some weights just to keep it down, keep it flat. And what I'd be inclined to do is just draw through the middle here and separate that piece off. It's just going to make my life a little easier for travelling around. And again, exactly like we did with the templates, we're looking at scoring that line rather than trying to cut it straight off. So holding the knife nice and far back, we're going to follow that line nice and gently, scoring as we go. In fact, to be fair, I can get rid of those. And then continue round. As gentle as you like. Just take your time. A good, sharp knife will do the job for you. I'm not fighting the leather. I'm not putting a lot of pressure on the knife. I'm letting the knife do its job, and the job I'm asking it to do at the moment is only to score the leather, nothing more. And that's the first pass taken care of. And there we go. Moving on to our next piece, we can use a rule just to line up with the top. And then carry on scoring that leather to cut it out nice and neatly. So our two pieces of leather, we line up. They look lovely. So we are now ready to do our scores. However, there is the slimmest of possibilities that your edges aren't that neat. So PVA, so temporary bond glue. What we can do, we can give this a little bit of a rough up on the back. Probably won't need an awful lot, to be fair. But what we will do here is we will give a little bit of a bead of glue to the inside of our leather here. This will just help you if you have rough edges. And what we're going to do is we're going to glue this onto here, and we will use our template to center, because what we're following is this line here. And then we will stick that in the press to ensure a good clean bond, and we'll come back and have a look at that in a moment. So we've glued our front section to our back section. We're now beginning to see the whole thing come together, but we're a little bit ropey on the edge. So what we can do is take a sanding block, and we can then just begin to clean up this edge. Give that some love, and we see how very quickly it begins to even up, and we've got a little bit of inconsistency here, so again we'll spend some time doing that. So I shall finish this up, make sure all these edges are nice and clean, and at which point then we can run our stitch line around the leather, and that will ensure that everything lines up front and back. So having tied up our edges so we have a nice line to follow, we can run our stitch line around the outside, ensuring that it is nice and consistent, and we can take it up to that line there. We can do exactly the same on the back. All the way around like so. Here we have two options. Our first option is we can go through both pieces of leather together and mark up our holes as one. Our other option is to separate and do our holes as two lots of separate holes, and that's what we're going to do here. We're going to separate our leather, so we'll take a bone fold, and what we're not going to do is just pull the leather apart, because that'll stretch and stress it. And we're going to use a bone folder. I'm just going to lift it off like so. We will then, knowing that these top two holes will line up, we're happy that we've got them in the right place, we will then begin to commit to a series of holes around the outside of our piece. And this is pre-pricking, so we're ensuring that we have a nice stitch front and back, because it's one of those little items that when somebody picks up and looks at it, the first thing they're going to do is turn it around and look at the back. Now, if you're curious about the double pricking technique, subscribe to my Vimeo channel. That's one of the techniques discussed in detail on that channel, and it shows you how to get a high level of stitching using this simple technique. So let me make all these holes on both pieces and then come back when that's complete. All the holes made on the front, on the back. I'm not going to count them, but if I did, they would be the same amount. And the idea behind this is we can ensure that when we stitch, we're going through the right hole and everything will line up lovely. Now, we can see clearly where the stitching is going to be. We can see clearly where the stitching isn't. So what we're going to do is, this is shoulder, so shoulder will crease cold. However, if you have particular difficulties, you can heat your iron up and you can hot crease. So what we'll do first is we'll just test out a cold crease, and that works fine. We're happy with that. And again, if you want to look at the creasing techniques using a hot crease, a cold crease or a wooden crease, have a look at my Vimeo channel. I go into a lot of detail about that on there. And then we'll just run this around our edge, and what we're looking for here is a little bit of detail on what otherwise would be a plain piece of leather, and it just finishes that edge off nice and smartly. And there we go, there's a cold crease for both pieces. Now what we want to do is finish these edges off. So we are going to look at perhaps a bevel, and let me just find a 0. So here we have a nice Barry King edge beveler, and again, all the details on how to do this properly are on my Vimeo channel. Why we do each side first. And there's our bevel. We'll do exactly the same for our flap. and then finish off on the outside. The leather that I'm using here is a leather called Lamport from Metropolitan Leather. It's a dyed through shoulder, very forgiving, very easy to work. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do now is we're going to slick up this edge. So we've got a nice clean edge to work to, we've got a nice bevel, we've got a nice slicker that we're going to do this with. It's a little bit rough, a little bit ropey, so what I'm going to do first is just take off a little bit of that top grain. I'll take it to the side and add some moisture, and then using the smallest groove I'm going to begin to bed those fibres in, and we can already see a lovely sheen beginning to appear at the edge of that leather, and that's bonding those fibres down nice and cleanly. And we'll do exactly the same on the flap. Adding a little bit of moisture off screen. Those that know. Those that don't, follow me on Instagram and look for the hashtag lick it and slick it. You'll work it out. And at which point we continue to bond those fibres in. Now slicking really brings that edge up, but it won't last. Once those fibres are dried out, they'll begin to stand up again. So it looks pretty for a couple of minutes. So the next thing that we have to do is bond those fibres together. Now, I don't like using dye on shoulder because the viscosity of the dye is very fine, and you tend to find that it can bleed in and we can have black marks where we don't want black marks. So I use edge coat, Fibing's edge coat. It's thicker than dye. It still penetrates the leather, however it sits on the surface more than dye does and won't bleed into the leather, but it will bond with those fibres and give a very even and consistent edge. And our bevel line that we've created on the front is a lovely clean line for us to follow with that edge coat, so we have a very smart clean black line there. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to use the pencil now as a slicker. I'm just going to ride this edge coat into the fibres, applying a little bit of pressure as I go, and that'll do. Set that to one side to dry, it doesn't take much, and then we'll do the flap. And we're not far off. In reality, we are looking at finishing this edge, adding our hardware, and then stitching it together, and then finishing the edge that we've just stitched. The edges are nice and dry, and we can see that lovely clean crisp black edge there. What I'm going to do now is just ride a bit of beeswax over that edge, and that's going to then get slicked in with the fibres and just really bond that edge over. Now, the normal course of events I would do is take it to the burnisher, and the reason being it applies a lot more heat, a lot quicker, melts the beeswax, melts the edge coat, bonds with the fibres, slicks it down, and that's an edge that will last a lifetime. However, not everybody has a burnisher, so I'm going to show you that it can be done with a hand slicker. And we're just applying even, consistent pressure building up a little bit of warmth to slick those fibres down. There we have that lovely edge, and do exactly the same again. A nice clean cloth, and then what we're going to do is just ride that edge in, so we have that absolute pristine sharp edge where the edge coat meets the leather, and do exactly the same on the flap as well. And that's that bit done. Now this is an ideal time to add our maker's mark, so that's what we'll do there then. We'll add our maker's mark to the back, and we are now ready to take our two pieces to the clam. What we will do, however, is we will get a sand brown stud, which has been excessively sellotaped. Thank you, Will. Now I nipped up to Le Privot in Newcastle upon Tyne recently and met the guys up there. Always spoke over the phone, always spoke online. First time I ever had to actually walk in, and loads of little bits and pieces. They have far more than I ever gave them credit for, and I came across these little packs, 100 Sam Brand studs, dirt cheap. I think it was something like 15-16 quid for 100. Bargain. And there we go, Sam Brown stud attached. So that will now pop on there. There's our closure. Once that's stitched in place, the whole thing is beginning to look quite gorgeous. So we'll take a couple of needles and we'll put it through top hole at the back, top hole at the front, maybe. There we go. Do exactly the same on the other side, and the theory being, with those two holes lined up, everything else will fall into place around the base, and sure enough it does. So we're going to take this to the clam and we are going to stitch this together. We're going to stitch it traditional. We're going to go brown leather, brass furniture, so therefore we'll stitch it yellow thread. Let's take it to the clam, stitch it up and see how it looks. Now I thought I'd be lazy and use one of the little Dream Factory clams I picked up earlier in the year. Now I picked these clams up for travelling and don't really use them to any great extent in the workshop because I've got the big clam, but I thought, well, rather than mess about moving the camera, let's have a go. So I've used the two needles to line up the top two holes on both the front and the back, put it in the clam, locked it in place, it's not going to move, and I'm going to follow the proviso of starting as I mean to finish. So I'm looking at 2 back stitches, and in truth I've only done 1 hole there. So what I need to do is bring this second needle back out and bring it into the 3rd hole, and I shall centre my thread up to that. So that will give me 2 back stitches to start and 2 back stitches to finish. Now again, the stitch. I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail on the stitching because I will presume that you have an understanding of the saddle stitch. If, however, you don't, then here on YouTube you can have a look at my saddle stitch in detail video, and that will help. Or again, you can subscribe to my Vimeo channel, and all the different ways of producing the saddle stitch are contained on there. So what we've done here is independently pricked both pieces of leather, the front and the back. And again, double pricking will, or is, explained in detail on my channel. But what this does is this gives us a lovely angle to our stitching on both the front and the back. And this gives us the ability to give quite a showy stitch with angles on a piece where both the front and the back are examined. And something dinky like this, you are going to pick it up, you're going to look at the front, you're going to look at the back, and if your stitching on the back is poor, it's letting it down. So double pricking takes a little bit more time, I appreciate, but that time is worth the effort, because the whole thing just begins to sing out at a much higher level and better quality. That's that done. Let's take it to the bench, give it a tap down, and then clean these edges up. So that's the pouch stitched, the front stitch to the back, and we can see there we've got a nice stitch going on both the back and the front. So the next thing to do, let's clean up these edges, add a little bit of a bevel all the way around the front and then the back. Now it doesn't matter which side you do first in this situation because they are both face side leather. However, we've got a bit of a wobble going on here, so what we'll do is we'll bring the block over, we'll sit the sand brown stud off the edge of the block, and then we can spin our leather round nice and flat. And there we go. That's our bevel front and back. So all we need to do now is slick up these edges. Let's take it off, give it some moisture. And then we will use the third groove on our slicker, and we'll begin to ride those fibres down until they really begin to bond together and that shine appears. And that's the lovely thing about this Armitage leather slicker. You can get these from justwood.com. is it will slick the edges, so we get that lovely nice edge there, but it keeps the spine nice and flat. A little bit more moisture. So we get this lovely sharp and clean profile going on the edge of the leather. Dogs are here to say hi. Hi dogs. We can see that shine coming up. Beautiful. Oh, wrong one. That's now ready for our edge coat. So at which point then, travelling down the spine, which is nice and flat because of our lovely slicker, black that up, right to the front, and add our edge coat to that bevel, all the way to the edge, and do exactly the same for the back. And there we are done. Give those edges a little bit of a rub up, and that is it. We are done. That is a very, very simple little flat pouch, and if we bend this over, pop our Sam Brown stud in, line that up and give it a press. That is complete. As simple as you like. The shape is not important. The size is not important. It's a really good little practice piece to get your skills up to speed of cutting more complex shapes to make a pattern, so we can ultimately work towards an object. And using something like this, we can take a little stick, pop it inside, and we can begin to ride our leather out against our seam, giving the pouch a little bit of a swell. In doing this, it gives it quite a little bit of volume. And we can find we can actually get quite a lot in there. Ideal little pouch for headphones, keys, money, coins, whatever you want it to be. We could actually squeeze in, not like that, we could actually squeeze in quite a few little trinkets. But in essence, it is still just a little flat pouch. Folks, practice that. What we're going to do now is going to do exactly the same again, except on this occasion it's the same pouch, no different, but on this occasion we're adding a gusset, and we will see immediately the volume that we have here increases to the point of something quite substantial like this we can actually pop in there. It will take an awful lot more, so we're going to have a play at making something larger, and this is where we're building up. It's a tier thing. This is our first tier. This is our simple little project to get us up to speed with the cutting of the shapes, the finishing, the edging, the stitching, and once we're happy with that, we can build towards adding a gusset to give us volume. This is where we begin to take this simple little shape and turn it into the possibilities of a bag. We increase this in size and volume, put a strap on it, this is a bag. We make two of them, put a strap between the two, we have saddlebags, and so it goes. Stitch them back to back, and all of a sudden we have quite a nice little utility pouch, USB cables, headphones, whatever you want it to be. So let's now go to our other pattern, because there are two of these patterns. There's the short one and the long one, and the next one we're going to is the long one. So let's get set up for that.